Among the figures who shaped the military history of the late antique Mediterranean world, Belisarius stands as one of the most thoroughly documented and analytically examined commanders. His career unfolded during the reign of Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, a period defined by administrative reform, vast territorial ambition, and the profound instability that followed the gradual fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire. To understand his role within this environment, it is necessary to approach the sources carefully, relying primarily on contemporary accounts, such as those preserved in the works of Procopius, alongside later evaluations informed by archaeology and modern historical scholarship. If you often explore material that examines how states respond to shifting borders, military pressure, and political uncertainty, you may find this narrative aligning with the broader patterns that draw your interest. The focus here is not to elevate Belisarius through legend, but to reconstruct the conditions under which he operated, a world in which Roman identity persisted administratively and culturally, even as the geopolitical realities of the Mediterranean were changing rapidly. Belisarius emerged at a time when the Eastern Roman Empire, often referred to as the Byzantine Empire in modern terminology, held a unique position between older imperial traditions and the developing political structures of post-Roman Europe. Centered in Constantinople, the empire maintained a complex network of administrative provinces, strategic fortifications, and diplomatic ties that stretched across Anatolia, the Balkans, North Africa, and the Near East. It was within this multi-regional environment, shaped by both opportunity and crisis, that Belisarius began his ascent. The 6th century was marked by significant military challenges, persistent conflict with the Sasanian Empire along the eastern frontier, the rise of Germanic kingdoms in former Roman territories, and repeated pressures along the Danube. Justinian's expansive restoration program, aimed at reasserting Roman authority in regions once governed from Rome, required commanders capable of navigating not only battlefields, but also complex political considerations. Belisarius would become one of the central figures in executing these ambitions, serving as both a military strategist and a representative of the imperial will across multiple theaters of war. This introduction establishes the broader framework necessary to examine Belisarius's career in detail. It situates him within the administrative and geopolitical realities of the Eastern Roman Empire, highlights the sources through which his actions are known, and prepares the ground for a closer look at the specific campaigns and decisions that shaped his legacy. Although the precise details of Belisarius's early life remain limited in surviving textual sources, the available evidence suggests that he originated from the region of Thrace, an area that in the 6th century formed a significant frontier zone of the Eastern Roman Empire. Thrace's landscape, stretching from the eastern Balkans toward the approaches of Constantinople, was characterized by agricultural settlements, military roads, and a network of fortifications designed to protect the capital from incursions across the Danubian frontier. Growing up in such an environment meant that military structures and imperial presence were part of daily life, shaping the social context in which young men often entered service. The late antique world in which Belisarius came of age was marked by the continuing professionalization of the Roman military system. Even as the empire adopted federate troops and negotiated with neighboring powers, it maintained elite units trained within its own institutional framework. Belisarius is believed to have begun his military career within one of these elite formations, possibly the Bucellarari, a class of heavily armed cavalry retainers associated with high-ranking officials. This would later influence his preference for mobile, disciplined cavalry forces during his major campaigns. Evidence from Procopius and other contemporaries indicates that Belisarius's early service placed him in proximity to the imperial court, giving him access to training, equipment, and command structures not typically available to provincial recruits. His rise occurred during a period when military merit, political loyalty, and access to the center of imperial administration intersected, allowing ambitious officers to advance quickly under the right circumstances. The connection to Justinian, then still ascending within the hierarchy that surrounded the aging Emperor Justin I, proved especially consequential for Belisarius's later responsibilities. The cultural and administrative environment of Constantinople also shaped his early development. The city functioned as the empire's primary military, economic, and intellectual hub, where officers were exposed to theological debates, legal reforms, and diplomatic negotiations that influenced imperial policy. In such a setting, military leaders were expected not only to command troops, but to understand the broader political objectives that guided imperial campaigns. Belisarius's later career demonstrates an awareness of these complexities, reflecting the environment that shaped him before his first major assignments in the eastern frontier regions. Archaeological studies of Thracian fortifications and 6th century military installations help illustrate the physical context in which Belisarius's early experiences unfolded. Excavations revealed defensive structures, supply depots, and cavalry facilities consistent with the military culture of the period. While these findings cannot be linked directly to Belisarius himself, they provide the material backdrop necessary for understanding the world that produced one of the most capable commanders of Justinian's reign. As the empire entered a renewed military ambition under Justinian, Belisarius's early exposure to frontier conditions, elite military structures, and imperial administration positioned him to take on roles of increasing responsibility. These foundations would shape his actions during some of the most significant military campaigns of the 6th century. The rise of Belisarius cannot be examined apart from the broader political and administrative environment shaped by Emperor Justinian, whose reign marked one of the most ambitious periods of state-directed transformation in the Eastern Roman Empire. When Justinian assumed power in the year 527, he inherited an empire that was administratively stable yet strategically pressured along multiple frontiers, and his response was a program of consolidation and expansion intended to reaffirm Roman authority across regions once incorporated into the imperial system. Justinian's policies combined legal reform, territorial recovery, religious uniformity, and infrastructural investment, each supported by an extensive network of advisors, military commanders, and administrative officials. The Corpus Juris Civilis, monumental construction projects such as Hagia Sophia, and the reconquest campaigns in Africa and Italy all emerged from a centralized vision that sought to redefine imperial supremacy. For this vision to succeed, however, Justinian required commanders capable of executing military operations across diverse terrains, while navigating the political implications of each campaign. Belisarius became one of the central figures entrusted with these responsibilities. Procopius, writing as both participant and observer, emphasizes that Justinian maintained close oversight of military strategy, issuing directives that reflected the emperor's broader geopolitical objectives. Belisarius's role within this system was shaped by his reliability, his capacity for rapid maneuver warfare, and his understanding of how military action served administrative goals. The relationship between emperor and general, though shaped by hierarchy, included an element of mutual dependence. Justinian required a commander capable of translating imperial ambition into practical outcomes, while Belisarius required imperial backing to secure resources and legitimacy for operations conducted far from Constantinople. The Justinianic era also witnessed major internal challenges, including the Nika Riots of 532, which destabilized the capital and tested the cohesion of imperial authority. Belisarius played a key role in restoring order during this event, demonstrating his capacity not only to command troops on distant frontiers, but also to act decisively in the political center of the empire. This involvement strengthened his position within the court and underscored the dual nature of military service in the 6th century, where commanders were expected to manage both external threats and internal upheaval. Simultaneously, external pressures intensified along the eastern frontier, where conflict with the Sasanian Empire continued to shape imperial strategy. Justinian's efforts to assert influence in the western Mediterranean could not be separated from the need to maintain stability in the east. The emperor's reliance on Belisarius, therefore, grew, as the general demonstrated an ability to transfer skills learned on the Persian front to campaigns in Africa and Italy. These experiences, in turn, positioned Belisarius at the center of Justinian's most ambitious reconquest efforts. Archaeological research and modern historical analysis provide additional insight into the logistical and administrative framework that made Justinian's campaigns possible. Supply routes across Anatolia, naval resources drawn from the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean, and garrison networks in frontier provinces reveal the infrastructure that supported Belisarius's operations. These systems reflected the empire's capacity to project power across distances, a feature essential to the emperor's broader territorial aims. Within this environment of expansive policy, strategic ambition, and administrative complexity, Belisarius emerged not simply as a military officer, but as an instrument of imperial restoration. The campaigns that followed, against Persia, in North Africa, and later in Italy, reflect both his individual capability and the structural forces that shaped the Justinianic era.
The eastern frontier of the Eastern Roman Empire, stretching across Mesopotamia and the mountainous regions that bordered the Sasanian state, formed one of the most strategically sensitive zones of the 6th century. It was in this environment of contested fortresses, shifting alliances, and complex diplomatic negotiations that Belisarius first demonstrated his command abilities on a large scale. The frontier was defined not only by recurrent warfare, but by an infrastructure of fortified cities, supply corridors, and administrative districts shaped over generations of imperial and Sasanian interaction. Conflict between the two empires followed a long-standing rhythm, periods of negotiated stability punctuated by intense military engagements, each influenced by taxation, territorial claims, and the broader geopolitical situation across the Near East. Sources indicate that Belisarius operated within this context during the early years of Justinian's reign, participating in campaigns that required balancing aggression with caution, as both empires sought advantage without risking full-scale destabilization. His appointment to key positions along the frontier reflects Justinian's trust in his ability to manage these delicate dynamics. The most well-documented episode of Belisarius's Persian campaigns is the Battle of Dara in the year 530. Dara, located near the desert edge and serving as one of the principal Roman fortresses in the region, held strategic importance due to its proximity to key Sasanian routes. Procopius describes how Belisarius employed a combination of defensive preparation and controlled cavalry maneuvers, using trenches, coordinated infantry lines, and mobile units to counter a numerically superior Sasanian force. While the battle did not resolve the long-term conflict, it demonstrated Belisarius's skill in adapting terrain, infrastructure, and tactical innovation to achieve a limited but symbolically significant victory. Other engagements on the Eastern Front, including the confrontation at Callinicum, reveal the broader constraints under which Belisarius operated. The fluctuating support from imperial authorities, the logistical demands of campaigning along the Euphrates, and the mobility of Sasanian units all shaped outcomes. Modern analyses of these battles emphasize the difficulties inherent in frontier warfare: supply chain vulnerability, seasonal climate patterns, and the need to coordinate local garrisons with mobile field armies. Belisarius's actions must therefore be understood within the material and environmental conditions that structured Persian-Roman conflict during this period. Diplomacy also played a central role in Belisarius's experience on the Eastern Front. Treaties negotiated between Constantinople and Ctesiphon involved payments, territorial adjustments, and agreements over fortification rights, each reflecting the delicate balance of power. Military commanders were expected not only to enforce imperial boundaries, but to respond to diplomatic shifts that could alter campaign priorities with little warning. Belisarius's conduct in this environment demonstrates his familiarity with the broader political aims underpinning military operations, an element essential to understanding his later successes in Africa and Italy. Archaeological surveys of the Mesopotamian frontier, including fortified sites, water channels, and remnants of Roman and Sasanian infrastructure, help contextualize Belisarius's campaigns within a landscape shaped by centuries of strategic development. These findings reinforce the view that operations in the region were part of a long-term struggle for control over key routes, resources, and defensive lines. Through his service in Persia, Belisarius gained experience with diverse tactical challenges, logistical systems, and diplomatic negotiations. These early campaigns established the foundation for his role in Justinian's more ambitious efforts beyond the eastern frontier, beginning with the major operation that would unfold on the North African coast.
The North African campaign, initiated by Justinian in the year 533, represented one of the most strategically significant undertakings of Belisarius's career. The region, once part of the Western Roman Empire, had come under Vandal control during the 5th century, creating a political landscape defined by shifting loyalties, maritime tension, and a weakened Roman presence in the Western Mediterranean. For Justinian, the recovery of Africa was both a symbolic assertion of imperial continuity and a practical effort to secure vital grain routes and maritime corridors. Belisarius was chosen to lead the expedition, reflecting the emperor's confidence in his capacity to execute operations far from the logistical centers of Constantinople. Preparation for the campaign involved extensive coordination across administrative, naval, and military structures. Contemporary sources describe an armada composed of several hundred ships assembled at Constantinople and nearby ports, carrying infantry, cavalry, supplies, and officials responsible for managing the province once reoccupied. The fleet sailed along the coasts of Greece and Crete before crossing into the central Mediterranean, navigating a route shaped by prevailing winds, supply constraints, and the need to avoid detection by Vandal forces. This long-distance maritime movement illustrates the empire's logistical sophistication and its ability to project power across great distances. Upon reaching North Africa, Belisarius confronted a Vandal state weakened by internal division and inconsistent leadership. Procopius notes that the Vandal king Gelamair faced both political fragmentation and difficulties mobilizing forces in time to mount a coordinated defense. Belisarius's disciplined troops, trained in combined arms coordination, were able to maneuver effectively against Vandal cavalry, whose strength had traditionally been a defining feature of the kingdom's military power. The Battle of Ad Decimum, fought near Carthage, demonstrated the importance of organization and communication. Belisarius's ability to maintain cohesion across dispersed units allowed him to prevent the Vandals from exploiting their numerical advantages. Following the victory at Ad Decimum, Belisarius advanced toward Carthage, entering the city with minimal resistance. His conduct during this phase reflects both military discipline and administrative awareness, as he issued directives to prevent looting, maintain order, and reassure the local population. This approach matched imperial objectives, aimed at establishing stability quickly and avoiding disruptions that could undermine long-term governance. The subsequent engagement at Tricomarum, which effectively eliminated organized Vandal resistance, solidified the success of the campaign and facilitated the reintegration of North Africa into the imperial system. The rapid collapse of Vandal authority was followed by administrative restructuring overseen by imperial officials. Military garrisons, taxation systems, and legal institutions were re-established, though the stability of the region would later be tested by local uprisings and external pressures. From an analytical perspective, the North African campaign revealed Belisarius's ability to balance strategic decisiveness with careful management of civic affairs, demonstrating the dual role required of imperial commanders operating in newly recovered territories. Archaeological findings in Carthage and surrounding sites help contextualize the campaign by illustrating the material conditions of the region during the 6th century. Excavated fortifications, harbor structures, and urban layers provide insight into the physical environment in which Belisarius's forces operated. These findings align with textual accounts describing Carthage as a major urban center capable of supporting imperial administration once reabsorbed. The African campaign also served as a prelude to further imperial ambitions in the Western Mediterranean. With North Africa secured, Justinian turned his attention toward Italy, where the Ostrogothic kingdom held territories that had formerly been central to Roman identity. Belisarius, having demonstrated his capability in long-distance operations, would once again be called upon to lead the emperor's most significant military undertaking.
The Italian campaign, launched shortly after the consolidation of North Africa, represented one of the most complex and resource-intensive operations of Justinian's reign. The Ostrogothic kingdom that controlled Italy in the 6th century maintained administrative structures inherited from the Western Roman Empire, creating a political environment distinct from that of Africa or the eastern frontier. For Justinian, the recovery of Italy held symbolic significance, as Rome remained a central reference point in imperial identity, law, and historical memory. Belisarius was selected to lead the expedition owing to his demonstrated capacity to operate across distant theaters while upholding imperial objectives. The military and logistical challenges of the campaign were substantial. Italy's geography, mountain chains, fortified urban centers, narrow coastal corridors, and variable climate required both tactical adaptability and the careful coordination of naval and land operations. Procopius's accounts emphasize that Belisarius began by securing Sicily, whose position offered a strategic base for operations on the peninsula. The island's ports, supply routes, and communication lines were crucial for supporting the extended campaign that followed. From Sicily, Belisarius advanced northward, landing in southern Italy and progressing through regions where local populations maintained varied loyalties shaped by decades of Gothic governance. Several cities surrendered with minimal resistance, influenced by Belisarius's enforcement of discipline among his troops and his efforts to present imperial rule as a stabilizing alternative to ongoing political uncertainty. This initial success allowed Roman forces to maintain momentum as they approached Rome, one of the most symbolically significant objectives of the entire reconquest effort. The entry into Rome in the year 536, documented extensively by Procopius, marked a turning point in the campaign. The city, though diminished in population and influence, remained a fortified center with deep cultural resonance. Belisarius's occupation required not only military presence, but diplomatic engagement with local authorities, church officials,
and civilian communities. His subsequent defense of the city during the Ostrogothic siege demonstrated a capacity for prolonged strategic endurance. The use of fortifications, control of water access points, distribution of supplies, and coordination with naval forces ensured that Rome remained under imperial control despite sustained pressure. The wider Italian campaign unfolded across multiple fronts. As Belisarius advanced northward, he confronted Gothic forces defending key strongholds, including Ravenna, Milan, and several fortified settlements along the Apennine corridors. Each stage reflected the variable conditions of Italian warfare, shifts in terrain, local alliances, and the ability of Gothic commanders to exploit their knowledge of regional geography. Belisarius's efforts to maintain cohesion among diverse units, infantry, cavalry, naval detachments, and local militias illustrate the complexity of warfare within a peninsula marked by centuries of layered political structures. Modern archaeological research across Italy provides material context for the campaign. Excavations of fortifications, siege works, and urban destruction layers from the 6th century align with textual accounts describing prolonged conflict and shifting control. Defensive walls in Rome, Ravenna, and Naples show modifications consistent with efforts to strengthen positions during Justinian's reconquest. These findings reinforce the logistical and environmental challenges Belisarius encountered, including the need to adapt strategies to urban infrastructure shaped by earlier Roman engineering. Despite Belisarius's successes, the Italian campaign was marked by periods of administrative tension. Imperial directives, court politics, and changing strategic priorities influenced the pace and direction of operations. At several points, Belisarius was recalled or reassigned, reflecting Justinian's balancing of military outcomes with concerns over loyalty, resources, and diplomatic developments elsewhere in the empire. Yet even within these constraints, Belisarius played an instrumental role in re-establishing imperial authority across much of the peninsula. The campaigns in Italy revealed his ability to manage extended operations across complex terrain while navigating shifting political conditions. These experiences would contribute directly to interpretations of Belisarius as one of the final commanders to embody the traditions of Roman military leadership, a theme central to understanding his overarching legacy.
An examination of Belisarius's military career reveals a consistent pattern of strategic adaptability informed by logistical awareness, terrain assessment, and the coordinated use of mixed troop types. Unlike many commanders of late antiquity, whose actions were constrained by regional familiarity or limited administrative resources, Belisarius operated across diverse environments, from the fortified cities of the Mesopotamian frontier to the open plains of North Africa and the urbanized landscapes of Italy. Each campaign required an understanding not only of battlefield tactics, but of the structural conditions that shaped imperial warfare in the 6th century. A central feature of Belisarius's approach was the integration of cavalry and infantry into flexible, multi-layered formations. Procopius frequently highlights Belisarius's reliance on mounted units, particularly those drawn from the Bucellarii, to execute rapid maneuvers, flanking attacks, and countercharges. This emphasis reflected both his early military background and the broader evolution of Roman field armies, which increasingly depended on mobile forces capable of responding to threats across extended frontiers. His use of cavalry at Dara, Adus, Dissimum, and during engagements across Italy demonstrates a consistent application of mobility as a decisive strategic asset. Belisarius also placed significant importance on discipline and coordination, viewing cohesion as a prerequisite for operational success. His insistence on controlled conduct, particularly in newly conquered territories such as Carthage or Sicily, aligned military precision with administrative objectives. This approach minimized civilian disruption, maintained supply stability, and prevented local populations from turning against imperial authority. Modern scholarship often interprets this dual focus on strategy and administration as a defining characteristic of Belisarius's command style. Understanding terrain and infrastructure formed another essential component of his strategy. In the eastern provinces, fortifications and irrigation systems influenced troop movement and placement. In North Africa, open plains favored mobile cavalry actions, while proximity to coastal supply lines shaped logistical decisions. In Italy, Belisarius's operations engaged with pre-existing Roman urban defenses, aqueducts, and road networks, each of which played a role in determining siege tactics and troop deployment. Archaeological studies of 6th century structures across these regions support the strategic considerations described in written accounts. Another notable aspect of Belisarius's strategy was his ability to operate within the constraints of imperial politics. As a commander serving a powerful but interventionist emperor, Belisarius often adjusted his campaigns in response to shifting directives from Constantinople. The fluctuating resources allocated to different theaters of war required careful prioritization and the capability to recalibrate operations without undermining broader objectives. These political constraints, rather than tactical limitations, influenced several key turning points in both Africa and Italy. Modern analysis also emphasizes Belisarius's inclination toward minimizing unnecessary losses, using negotiation and calculated restraint when advantageous. His acceptance of city surrenders, his avoidance of destructive engagements, and his willingness to adapt to changing diplomatic conditions reflect a commander oriented toward long-term stability rather than short-term symbolic victories. These considerations aligned with Justinian's administrative goals while contributing to Belisarius's reputation for strategic patience. Collectively, these elements illustrate a commander skilled in combining tactical innovation with structural awareness, a figure whose actions reveal the complex demands of Roman military leadership during the 6th century. These strategic principles and their broader implications help clarify why later historians and military analysts often view Belisarius as one of the last individuals to embody the classical traditions of Roman generalship.
The legacy of Belisarius occupies a distinctive position in the study of late Roman military history, shaped by both contemporary documentation and the long-term evolution of historical interpretation. Among the primary sources, Procopius's accounts remain central, providing detailed descriptions of campaigns, political conditions, and administrative structures that frame Belisarius's career within the broader dynamics of Justinian's reign. Later historians, drawing on these narratives along with archaeological evidence from battle sites, fortifications, and urban layers, position Belisarius as one of the final figures to embody the operational traditions of classical Roman generalship. Modern scholarship emphasizes that Belisarius's reputation cannot be separated from the structural characteristics of the 6th century empire. His successes in Africa and Italy, as well as his earlier actions in the East, illustrate the continuing capacity of the Eastern Roman state to mobilize resources, coordinate naval and land operations, and maintain administrative authority across diverse regions. His role in these efforts highlights the ways in which individual command interacted with institutional frameworks, revealing a complex balance between imperial policy and field-level decision-making. Belisarius's conduct also contributed to broader discussions of military ethics and discipline within the late antique period. Procopius's repeated emphasis on his restraint, particularly during the occupation of major urban centers, aligns with administrative goals intended to limit disruption and promote civic stability. This pattern, evident across multiple campaigns, influences modern interpretations that view him as a commander guided by structural considerations rather than personal ambition. The long-term impact of Belisarius's campaigns had varied outcomes. North Africa was reintegrated into the imperial system, though it later faced internal pressures and external incursions. Italy's reoccupation, while symbolically significant, experienced prolonged instability due to continued conflict and strategic priorities. These complexities reveal the broader limitations of Justinian's restoration efforts, yet they also underscore Belisarius's ability to operate effectively within fluctuating political and logistical constraints. Archaeological analyses of fortifications in Italy, urban layers in Carthage, and frontier structures in Mesopotamia continue to refine the material context in which Belisarius's career unfolded. These findings contribute to a clearer understanding of the operational environments that shaped his decisions and illustrate the physical remnants of the strategic landscapes he navigated. Within the wider historiography of the Eastern Roman Empire, Belisarius endures as a representative of the transitional nature of late antiquity. His career illustrates the coexistence of classical Roman traditions with emerging Byzantine administrative practices, marking him as a figure whose actions reflect both continuity and transformation in imperial military culture. Through this framework, Belisarius remains a focal point for examining how the Eastern Roman state projected power during one of the most ambitious and politically charged periods of its history.